So for the interpreting hours, I watched the first 2016 presidential debate, which was 2 hours. I watched Marlee Matlin talk at Google, which was 40 minutes. I also watched her talk for SiriusXM, which was 20 minutes. I watched Beauty and the Beast, which was 25. I watched Mickey's Sensational Parade, which was 20. I watched Tangled in ASL as well, which was 30, and then I watched an update from Rick Scott from Hurricane Irma, which was 30. So in total, I watched 7 videos, and I learned quite a bit. The first one I watched was the presidential debate, and this was the longest one that I watched, and I thought that it was like pretty fascinating that they were able to like show this on DPAN. And one of the things, there was 3 interpreters in the left hand screen of the TV. The first interpreter was for the moderator, Lester. The second interpreter was for Donald Trump, and the third one was for Hillary Clinton. And for Hillary and Donald, their interpreters switched out every 20 minutes. And this relates to stuff that we learned in class because we talked about how it is important, especially in like high stress areas, such as like legal areas, in this case a presidential debate, that the interpreters don't get tired, because if they get tired, they could possibly make more mistakes. So I found this very interesting that they were able to switch them out, and like that they were cognizant of that this is important to switch them out because of the high stress of the situation. I found it also kind of cool to watch because Donald and Hillary would interrupt each other, and so the interpreters would end up interrupting each other, and this is something that you don't normally see in a regular setting. Usually interpreters will let one finish if there's multiple interpreters present. So this was different from most settings, which could cause like some changes for deaf viewers. Another distraction for it is when people started clapping, like in some parts of it, even though they were asked not to. This could cause some distractions, which could affect how the interpreters do their job, and they could get distracted, and this is something that they have to be aware of. After that, I watched both Marlee Matlin videos. In the first one, she talked at Google about closed captioning, and her interpreter was there, like her right-hand man, the guy that's always with her, and he actually was in the audience when she was signing. So this is a different perspective than most interpreters. They're usually on stage, and this was different because the interpreter was going from his B to his A language instead of from his A to his B language. So this is something that we also learned, so it was probably easier for him to interpret that way because his A language is stronger than his B, which is English. And at one point, she asked him to explain something about closed captioning, about a law that is like ready to be passed, and he actually came up on stage and started talking about it, and he ended up signing with one hand with the mic in his hand. So this could cause like some difficulties because he's trying to sign so that Marlee Matlin could see what he's saying, but he's also trying to talk to the audience about what was going on. But she did invite him on stage, so I think she expected that as well. So that was something that was different as well. And then Marlee Matlin talked on Sirius Radio. The whole thing with the B to the A language, but then he was also going from A to B because for a lot of it because the talk show host was asking her questions. So, and during the setup, she was here, he was here, and then the talk show host was not in the camera, but you could tell that he was behind them because the interpreter kept on turning around like this to look at him when he would say something. And this could cause some difficulties because if Marlee's trying to talk to him and he's turned around looking at the talk show host, this could cause some communication barriers, which I thought was kind of interesting how they had it set up. You would think that they would set it up differently so that the interpreter had view of both the talk show host and Marlee at the same time without having to turn around. The next one that I watched was Beauty and the Beast interpreted. There was 2 interpreters present for this, and I realized that for a lot of the Disney shows, these these interpreters probably memorize the shows as they go on. So this is very repetitive, and for an interpreter, I guess that could become boring after a while if this is what your job is constantly, just interpreting shows and parades and things like that. So it could become slightly boring, which could also impact facials, which we talked about in our content as well, and how important facials are to interpreting, because if you're just doing the same old thing, you might forget that, oh, this facial is important to what we're talking about. And that kind of applies to all of the Disney ones that I watched. And in the Beauty and the Beast video that I actually watched, you could hear a baby crying in the background. So this probably happens a lot where there's outside distractions because it's a family-friendly environment. There's a lot of kids running around. So it's probably hard. It could be possibly hard for interpreters to stay focused on what's happening, because usually when you hear something, you tend to look at it. So this could cause some difficulty. The next one that I watched was Mickey's Soundsational Parade. And this had 2 interpreters as well. And it was a very loud environment from what I was seeing. And they're faced away from the parade, but they also probably have it memorized because of just the nature of the work. And it would also kind of be hard to focus on the task at hand because of how loud it is, and this is something that they need to take into consideration when becoming a Disney interpreter. And this was kind of around all of them. The same thing goes for ASL Disney Tangled. I actually really enjoyed that one. The thing about the Disney interpreters is that there's usually 2 on stage because they play multiple characters, and it'd kind of be impossible for just one to play multiple characters. So you can tell that the interpreters have a very strong relationship, which is something that is kind of special, and it makes the experience for the deaf audience as well as the hearing audience there so much better, if the interpreters are comfortable with one another and able to act out part of the plays. And then the last one that I watched was an Irma update from Governor Rick Scott. And at the beginning, there's only one interpreter. And at the beginning of it, she wasn't even in the shot at first. It was just Rick Scott, and then they panned out to her at the end. Or not at the end, but about 30 seconds after he started talking. And this could cause some problems because if this is an important government update about an emergency that's happening, every word is important. So this is something that needs to be taken into account, as well as sometimes her signs would go blurry, she would blur out a little bit, which is important that this is discussed. And we talked about this in our content as well, about how important it is to have good access to technology, and that's also part of closed captioning rules and the ADA and things like that. So I really enjoyed this and I learned a lot. So thank you.